Well, hello everybody. You know what I was thinking? I was thinking no one wants to see a couple of middle-aged white guys comment on a film made by women about the objectification of a woman's body. And yet, here we are. Let's get into it. That's right, everybody. We're going to be looking at The Substance, film made by Coralie Farja. But first, let's bring on my co-host with the most, the man, the myth, the legend, my borscht bro, Mr. Jim Chaboyko. How you doing, my friend?
Good. As a female actor, in my experience, just kidding. No, just kidding. I went for my first skate, and today outdoor skate. Say what you will about the climate here, but outdoor skating is a definite plus. Although you need to sharpen those skates, I also learned. So
well, and the weather's been lovely the last few days.
Yes, yeah.
Just really nice. Like not just warm, but sunny, which is, that clear sunny. So it's crisp. It's not freezing. Folks, of course, we're coming to you from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, where it's also been minus 40.
Mm-hmm.
So,
very nice. It resembles the Charlie Brown Christmas type of weather with the Vince Guaraldi piano and everything else. Yeah, it's quite beautiful outside.
Jim, first of all, just want to quickly highlight, we've got, of course, our man from Kuwait City, Mr. Jelly Duck 100 in the chat. Good to see you, my friend.
Hey, JD.
JD 100. Jim, before we get into this flick, let me ask you this question. If you were presented with an opportunity to return to the past with your 20-year-old body, and yet with the knowledge you've gained since you were 20, would you want to?
I don't think so. Or if I sort of Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think these people were given enough information. And I sort of love that just quickly is that the substance is sort of an IKEA thing where you put it together yourself. There's no team of doctors,
Yeah.
nothing. But
Yeah.
anyhow,
That's right, folks. We're talking about The Substance, a 2024 film, written and directed by the French director Coralie Farja, sorry. Her last flick that I saw of hers was Revenge, which has some of the same themes. But here's the IMDb, the log line from IMDb. A fading celebrity takes a black market drug, a cell replicating substance that temporarily creates a younger, better version of herself. Of course, it's starring Demi Moore, Margaret Qualley,
yep.
and Dennis Quaid. And that is it. There are a couple of other players, somebody on the phone, but we're not talking, Jim, a big flick. It's really kind of like a 2-hour and 20-minute bottle episode. Jim, before we get into the spoiler zone, why don't you give us your see it or skip it?
Sure. This is a big see it for me. It's perhaps not for everyone. Gets a little gory, but yeah, it's a big swing, and I think on in most of the way it connects.
I that's exactly what I was thinking. It is a big swing, and you're absolutely right. You know what? I wouldn't say it's a knock it out of the park home run, but it's a big swing. The bat hits the ball pretty solidly. It's a see it for me as well. Yeah, it's one of those, it's damn near perfect. I still have some quibbles and some thematic elements that we can talk about later, but I think that's actually our cue. It's time to why don't we just jump right into whoopsie, the spoiler zone. This is why, kids, you're producing your own live stream. Do not, I repeat, do not be your own technical director if you can at all help it. Speaking of which, Jim, let's welcome our technical director, the man, the myth, the legend making, Mr. Luke Skywalker. What do you got to say for yourself, sir?
Well, if there's a bright center to the universe, you're on the planet that it's farthest from.
Oh my goodness, Jim. That's well, you know what? What can you do?
What an attitude, these callow youth. I should check with the stage director.
Bad feeling about this.
There you go. Say that again, Jim.
I should check with him that I'm unmuted. Just while we're
You are unmuted.
good. Okay, good.
Yeah.
I should also say we have Jelly Duck and Sydney Barrett is back with us as well. So
yeah,
hello,
and
Sydney.
Sydney's wow, Winter Peg A.
Yes.
You hit that one on the head. But to both you and Jelly Duck 100, great to see you here. You get the full
It's a rowdy.
the full applause. You know
Bunch of
what,
rowdies.
Jim? Said it before, I'll say it again. We got the mightiest little chat on the internet, and
Yes.
great to see you guys in the chat. Yeah, let's get into this flick, The Substance. Jim, I want to ask you this. The first question that comes to mind, or the first question as I was making notes for the show tonight, and I was like, do you think this is a horror film? Or I have some thoughts on it, but I wanted to hear what you thought
Sure.
first.
Sure. I mean, I think it's a horror. You know, if you say horror comedy, I think that might give the wrong impression. almost like those scary movie things the Wayans brothers did all those years ago. It's not that, but I mean, there's elements of satire here. There's all kinds of things going on. It's sort of with the I've come to realize myself that I like these things that are kind of mashups of things. District 9, for instance, you're watching it and you're like, is this that? Is it a buddy movie? Is it a science fiction movie? What is it? This is similar to that in that while you're watching it, not that I'm spending my time trying to pin it down, I'm enjoying the story, but you're figuring where is this going and what is it exactly? And that's kind of a neat thing.
Jim, yeah, I agree with you there. One of the things that struck me as I'm watching the film, you're in a different kind of world.
Mm-hmm.
There are, for a bit, at the beginning, it's like, are we in the 70s? It's got a 70s look. The cars of the 70s. At times, she's on a physical phone.
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth. And Sue later. But then it's like, no, that's a swipe card. And wait, no, I don't know where we are, right?
Yeah.
For me, though, coming back to the first question, and this goes for the folks in the chat too, is this a horror or for me, I don't think it's a horror, actually, although it has elements that you would find in a horror. I think this is, going back to some of the visual cues, makes me think of great 60s and 70s sci-fi. And you know what? I almost even said it in the introduction, but I don't want to. That's become a pejorative. It's like a really long Twilight Zone episode. One of the darker original Star Treks. But I think it has a lot of that going, and I'm thinking about J.G. Ballard. It has Stephen King in his more character-driven stuff. It's like, okay, well, let's see where this goes. I'm thinking Apt Pupil or, some of those darker stories. And yeah, even like hints of the lottery and stuff like that, like these, post-war, pre-Star Wars kind of ramifications of a thing. And
well, it's as gory as Space 1999, if you remember that.
Yeah.
This is just sitting there playing with my Lego at 7 years old going, watching the chopped up body on the conveyor belt. I'm like, this is unsettling.
I find this a little disturbing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly disturbing. Like the body, the gore of it at times.
Yeah.
And it's like, you've got The Shining, you've got Carrie, you've got Cronenberg, but at no time am I ever, it's missing that fear for a character.
Okay.
That suspense. And I don't mean, missing's maybe the wrong word. Missing to fit it into horror. Horror, you're kind of, there's a tension building up. Here, it's more like I'm watching a Greek tragedy. It's like, I know where this is going, and I can feel bad for her. I feel for both these characters, although they are one, but I can feel for them.
Yeah.
At the same time, I'm like, no, I know where this is going. I am not, when you see when her finger first changes and it's like, oh, well, there you go. So this is the hint. There's consequences.
Let's come to an agreement. Nope, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, and that going right to the heart of the character, right? Because it's, hey, you could stop the experience and unwilling to, it's like, just, hey, you can stop the experience at any time. There's no going back, but you can keep going forward.
Yeah. I think, if you're going to classify it, everyone talks about the body horror of it all, and definitely this reminds me of The Fly, which was such a great movie to see in the theaters all those years ago. It's the only movie I've been in that guys who didn't know each other were talking at the urinals about it, which is typically, if you're not a guy, you tend not to. You just keep mind your own business in the bathroom. But this is one that people are going like, "Holy jeez, eh?" Like it was that sort of that kind of experience. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think those things need to be mutually exclusive. I think it could be a sort of a, like I said, in the best case of the sense, a mashup, a sort of a sci-fi body horror. I wouldn't say it's straight horror. It's not a haunted house movie, but it's got elements of a bunch of different things too. So, yeah, it's an interesting question though.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I think. Like it's one of those things. It's kind of missing the scare.
Mm.
Or even although there's the body aspect to it, it's missing a component of, the dread
Yeah.
that you'd say find in a old Lovecraft story or something. I want to highlight, we've got Illuminated Pro in the chat. Let's see if, good to see you here, Illuminated Pro. And he's, what's up, guys? Let's talk the substance. And that is what we're doing. Illuminated Pro, in case you missed it, one of my first questions out of the gate was, would you call this a horror? Jim certainly feels that way. I'm leaning to it's more like a science fiction thing. And there's a tragic element to it, dare I say, Twilight Zone kind of story. But would love to hear what everyone feels on that in the chat. Jim, another thing I wanted to ask. Somebody online was talking about referring to it as neo-expressionist.
No, jeez.
Yeah. A creator I admire. I don't watch it for nothing. Even when I rant later this week about Dan Murrell and his hot take on AI, I still admire him. But this, I think it was Thomas Flight, and he was talking about the neo-expressionism of it. And I was watching it a bit, and I'm like, oh, I got to walk away. I got to watch this movie again. I need to have our conversation before I start really hearing what other people are saying.
Yeah.
Got to give our chat the first crack, right?
Mm.
But I did want to ask you, you've got that kind of big highfalutin definition of the look and the vibe of the film, but a part of me is like, it's almost got like a postmodern thing, but the look of it, I saw The Shining. I really saw The Shining. And right from that, the hallways and the colors of the hallways and the carpets, but that first bathroom, and then we only see more of that, but what do you think about that? What do you think about the look, the whole kind of hyper saturated color, except when she's outside?
Yeah.
Well, and then she's wearing that mustard thing.
Yeah, the colors are really interesting. The use of colors are really interesting here. A lot of primary colors, not a lot of patterns, like just a lot of solids. Yeah, the look's something else. It was only since I watched this a second time this weekend that I realized that it was, I believe it takes place in Los Angeles, but it was shot in France, evidently. So maybe that might add to the not quite LA of it all, but yeah, there's definitely a look that they're going for, that sort of curved hallway that's in Elizabeth's house. It's sort of the darkened hallway, the leading lines of the hallway in the studio. A lot of hallways.
Yeah. The hallway of it all.
Yeah, almost, aside from her living area, a lot of the spaces are institutional, and there's a few shots outdoors, but and there's a couple bars,
space,
but
her bathroom is
Yeah.
all is it's like the same tile as it
Yeah.
was in the bathroom,
Window.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's there's definitely a look they're going for. Yeah, come to think of it, not a lot of windows in some of the primary areas of
Yeah.
the
Just
movie,
that big
and
curved window in her
yeah,
living space that she
yeah.
starts to cover up. "Don't look at me."
Yeah, yeah. And they
Yeah.
even use that on a second viewing. They use that to great effect. I think
Yeah.
the big sort of showdown. You have it's a line. It's almost like they're playing doubles tennis because there's Sue and there's Elizabeth,
Yeah.
and then there's the poster of Sue, and then there's the poster of Elizabeth.
Yes.
And I didn't really appreciate that so much before when I watched it the first time because I was too caught up in thinking, what the hell's
Yeah.
happening? What's going to happen? Is that I was able to sort of appreciate these a lot more the second time. I should say, too, if you're going to watch it on a screen because I watched it a second time on my laptop. And there's not a lot of space there. So if you want to cover your eyes, in the gorier parts, yeah, you don't really get that.
I
Yeah, it's a little harder to do.
you know what? Coming back to this, the look of it all, though, something you said, and I'm gonna throw, the chat, Illuminated Pro, uh, Jelly Duck, they're both thinking body horror, psychological and body horror,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
also satirical dark comedy. And I if you look at the look and that all those production design choices,
Mhm.
how much of that is also the, because I really do think if we think about the character, or characters, we'll call, although they are one, they are also two,
Yeah.
uh, that they're at war with each other. Would you agree with that? Like that,
Oh,
it
yeah.
seems there is a conflict there, you know,
Well, and interestingly, when she bumps
like it is
into
in a way the conflict,
yeah, yeah.
you know?
Well, and that's maybe where it doesn't quite have those elements of horror that you were talking about. It's the phone calls quite literally coming from within the house. It's like
Oh,
everything's
yeah,
from within, right?
yeah,
And the threats are from within, and and that kind of thing. But uh, yeah, I think there's a sort of a submerged story here, and it's the story of the nurse the male nurse that
yeah,
initially turns her on to it because she bumps into him later in the cafe, and he
yeah,
says, "Has he started on you yet? Has he
yeah.
started stealing from you
Eating
yet? Taking
eating
eating?"
you
Yeah, that,
inside. Yeah,
yes, yeah,
yeah,
and so is this is this a good faith operation? Like that
yeah,
cranky guy that they keep calling on the phone who just says, yeah, just follow the rules or
yeah.
whatever. You know, he must know how these things turn out. And it seems that it's generally not, in two cases anyway, that it's not turning out too good.
Well, this is here's another question that it kind of occurs to me just regarding this story. Is this even, and I don't mean that Farja is doing something as cheap as a dream,
Mhm.
but there's kind of an unreliability about the narration. Oh, like almost everything truly gory they do. Like when Sue reaches in through her belly button to get out the drumstick
Yeah.
because which is a weird way in how they communicate with each other, but it pulls out the drumstick as she pulled it out of her ass and you know it's like, but then almost she pops it out and then it's like click, oh they've changed,
Yeah.
click, oh they've changed. And so even the weird, the end piece, which was a little bit of a bonus ending almost thing, I don't mean that in a positive way, like the ending kind of goes on, there's this moment of like, am I actually watching it? Was she really able to Quasimodo her way into the office with this thing?
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
it's
Yeah. Yeah.
only when there where she blows up and it's like, is this just like, you know,
Yeah.
is this actually happening?
That's a good point.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
like, or is this almost like Philip K. Dick stuff where it's all in again, I'm not saying totally cheap, but it would also explain the 70s, that weird sort of mix of 70s, like 70s vehicles everywhere, while at the same time, now that's a smartphone and,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, this could very well be, we've all heard stories of the forgotten Hollywood artist who was found 3 weeks after they died. Maybe not a huge star, but a supporting player that was found mummified on their couch or something like that. So, yeah, I mean that's not a bad theory because I think on 3 occasions there's that bait and switch where you think it's really happening and it's not. That it's somebody sees something super gory happens and then they wake up from it.
Yeah.
So yeah, when she's walking into the studio at the very end in the third act, I'm like,
Well,
initially I'm
walking.
like, how did with the mask on it? I
Well,
don't know.
and she's looking from below,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Whereas
Is nobody catching in on this? You don't seem well there, Liz. But
Yeah.
a quick shout out to SETV. There was an old when Count Floyd had the Monster Chiller Horror Theater. There was a movie called Whispers of the Wolf, and he had rented it, or he had gotten it for the show because he thought wolf, oh, that'll be scary. But it turned out to be this Ingmar Bergman rumination on the relationship of two sisters. And so at one point she cuts out a mask of her sister and she's putting lipstick on it. I thought, oh my God, that's directly from Whispers of the Wolf. And they come back to Count Floyd and he's like, whoa, wasn't that scary? How there are two faces merged into one another and they were talking at the same time. Anyway, it's definitely worth a look.
Yeah. Well, and that's interesting because it is Elizabeth's face that's pasted onto the beast.
From the poster in the living room. Yeah.
Want to draw a note to somebody new in the chat, Cat Ion. Good to see you here.
Oh, hello.
Cat Ion says the drumstick scene feels like it was a reference to Videodrome, they think. And yeah, that's the Cronenberg of it, right?
Yeah,
the also, I'm thinking, what's some of the other things where we've seen that kind of multi-bodied monster? But that's a great note, and yeah, welcome to the chat, Cat Ion.
Yeah, I should watch that again. I haven't seen it in years, and I love Cronenberg, so that's it's a good little pin.
Also, yeah, you see that in the explosion, or like how she kind of explodes.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, there's the blood fest, which again is like a Carrie moment. There she is on stage. But
yeah, there's a couple things I just wanted to mention that, and I'm not sure if it's just whether I buy into it or not. But my quick aside, my wife and I just finished watching Day of the Jackal, the 10-part series. It was hot garbage. I hated it. There was
Tell us how you really feel, Jim.
Oh, it was just brutal. And anyway, but so many plot holes and so many, one way to get away with a lot of things is to kill everyone. But anyway, there were a lot of things that I thought that were borrowed from other things, other works, other movies that made it seem derivative. In this case, I noticed a lot of similarity, like with the substance, I noticed a lot of similarities, but it didn't seem derivative. And I wonder if that's my own biases at play or just, because the Elephant Man, you're mentioning Stephen King, there's David The Fly, obviously, is a kind of it's fly adjacent in some ways, but at the same time, like I was totally along for the ride. It felt fresh. Maybe it's the voice with which it's delivered. I'm not entirely sure.
When I'm talking about those references, I'm not saying it's a ripoff. It's more. It's like you see it there, though.
Yeah,
and I suspect Farja Cat Ion in the chat says, although The Fly was the bigger overarching Cronenberg movie constantly referenced in this. And I'm like, I think Videodrome is more on point. Or what was was Debbie Harry in Videodrome or was she in Scanners?
No, she wasn't in Scanners, I don't
Okay,
think.
so Videodrome. But you know that there was a lot more, or Existenz.
Okay.
You know, where they're pulling weapons out of their body and it's all really weird, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas I think
David.
The Fly, that's a pretty straightforward man, you know, very much a horror, very much a man meddling with science he doesn't understand, and he's transformed into a monster.
Another
Like
big
it's
swing of a
yeah,
movie.
absolutely. But
Yeah.
it's, well, first of all, remake. Second of all, it's a little more straightforward. Oh, how this is going to play out. There's the
Mhm.
girlfriend. There's, I think it's a little more straightforward of a horror. And I
Yeah.
think Farja, while I suspect she's aware that people will make the Fly reference, I think there's other Cronenberg movies that were probably rolling around in her head, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I do think, and maybe it's time, let's talk. I want to get this social nutrition checklist out of the
Yeah, absolutely.
way
Yeah. Yeah.
so that we can talk more about, okay, what is she saying with this movie?
Mhm.
Of course, folks in the chat, do not hesitate to chime in on any aspect of the story. Like this is one of those great movies that you really can sink your teeth into.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
And
first, oh,
for
and
for any
go ahead, yeah.
I was just gonna say for anybody who came late, we did we went through the spoiler zone. We went through the border. We
Yeah,
crossed the border of the spoiler zone.
I
So
think we've blown past that.
yes, yeah.
But of course, before we do any of that, please give the video a like. Feel free to subscribe, and of course, ringy ding that bell.
Practical special effects.
A
No
linking
AI.
of the digital and the
Yes.
practical.
Yes.
Couple of filmmakers we are, Jim. All right. Yes, the social, let's get into the social nutrition checklist, shall we? All right, folks. Jim, I'm giving it a 50%.
Okay.
While it is a French-made film, although it's got a Warner Brothers, I suspect it's considered a domestic film. It's not an international film. I think, yeah, it's a totally women-led flick from a director, writer, director, two main stars, you know.
Yeah.
But so I wouldn't be surprised if it actually gets one, and I think it meets those minimum requirements. It is not a union-made film, or at least not that I can tell.
Yeah.
Does it pass the Bechdel test? Jim, I give it a check mark because I think Sue and Elizabeth, although they're never in the same room conversing with each other, the whole movie is really a conversation between these two. They do communicate with each other through the behavior, the way they treat their body.
Yeah.
Not just the other, but themselves. So I think it is a conversation, and I think that qualifies. They certainly never talk about a guy, like,
Yeah,
ever.
no.
Last but certainly not least, an issue close to my heart is is it does it have a working class perspective? And I would argue no, it doesn't. Not that it couldn't, and I could see some folks trying to stretch it, especially when we talk about celebrity and how celebrities are treated within our current culture. But I don't think it is. This is no Anora.
Yeah, I know.
So that's my take on that, which leads me to my first question about meaning, the meaning of it all. Another thing, I saw a headline and then I walked away because I was like, oh, wait a sec, Well, I'll tell you how I feel, but I wanna hear what you think and everyone else thinks is uh, I think it was in the New Yorker, no less. "If this is about aging, that isn't the way it works." And I'm like, "Aging? Well, okay, maybe." What do you think, Jim? Is this movie about aging?
Uh, yeah. I think it's about a lot of different things. I was writing down several thoughts after I watched this the second time, and yeah, it covers a lot of ground. I think or if anything, it's not necessarily about aging. It may be a reaction to aging, maybe a reaction to the passage of time. Something that we all have to deal with. There's several things going on. People would bring up the portrait of what's it, Dorian
Dorian
Gray.
Gray.
Yeah, as well. So there's elements of that in there. But I mean, it's sort of about self-hatred and self-love, and it's about regrets, and it's about looking back at your own life. It's about the sudden sense of powerlessness that I mean, Elizabeth could probably just live out the rest of her days in that mansion. I imagine she'd have money coming in. Like she's not teetering on the edge of bankruptcy or anything. It's just this is a fight back. Like this is her reaction to being dismissed by Dennis Quaid so glibly, and
Yeah. Well,
Dennis
and
Quaid's
it makes me
character.
think of, Sunset Boulevard,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah. I mean, it
Gloria
just
Swanson's remarkable last I
yeah.
think it was her last performance, wasn't it? I'm
Ooh, I'm
not
not
saying
sure of
Demi
that.
Moore is about to, alright,
No,
she's
no.
done, but
But the other interesting thing is that Demi Moore has always been an attractive woman. She was always cast as the babe in the '80s movies and things like that. So it's not the aging of a regular. I mean, it's aging, but it's not maybe the aging of like something that one of the
well,
hoi polloi would go through.
and this is a great point, Jim. The This is, I think, is about celebrity, and
Yes.
Demi Moore, if I can't think of of a movie star, especially one who has been a sex object, maybe not in quite the way Sarah Stone was, because she had a kind of sweetheart thing going on when she was younger, but she has been a tier one movie star, objectified, all that stuff. But she has, in the last several of her movies, she has also been a star that has explored that, probed it. And so I think Farja is interested in this subject, but I think Moore is as much.
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
thinking of, oh, she did even not Boiler Room. What was that? Margin Call.
Oh, okay.
You know, uh, there was another one where she kind of a thriller. It's actually a really cool little, if you see it online, folks, watch it. I can't remember what it's called, but it's about her as an executive in a diamond company, totally based on her and Michael Caine, based on obviously the De Beers. Um,
Okay.
but a woman who has reached a certain point and is being marginalized. Um, you saw that in Margin Call, and here is just another woman who's reached a certain point where they're and men saying, "Yeah, we're done with you."
Hmm.
And so I think that's a lot of what's going on here. But also that idea of, and this is why I think it's more like tragic, and this is why I'm leaning towards more science fiction,
Hmm.
is although horror has this, but it's almost like a morality play because there's still an element of, well, you don't get to be a top forever. You know, y- y- we all have to let go
Hmm.
for the next generation. you know, and so there's a bit of that tension here.
Yeah,
While
yeah.
at the same time, she's like, yeah, what is one of those first images? You mentioned the posters, Jim. What does she do? She blinds, she throws that, oh, the
Oh,
snow globe.
so,
Thank you.
yeah, yeah,
Um, some reminder of when she was young and beautiful and all
yes.
plasticky, throws it at it, and that blindness, that one eye thing sticks around for a while and is returned to,
Mm,
you know, and back to the poster and everything where it's that loathing of herself, of her body, of where she is, and that, you know, it's I don't care the cost. She never asks what the cost is, even right up to when she's going to get her thing. Like as
well,
usual,
that's
there's periods where she can turn back.
yeah.
She makes all these choices, and Elizabeth's even willing to crawl under like a supplicant does, you know,
Mhm.
to get under, to get into yet another hallway, and then yet another clean white room,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah,
what do you think?
there's
Am I talking out of my A double
no
S?
there's a couple of things going on here too, and then there's the scene just before the big fight scene where she's going to terminate the whole process. Like she's
Yeah.
as it says delicately in the Wikipedia page, she emerges as a hunchback, and, and then hunchback is hypertexted, which is funny. And she's about to finish the process, and she's looking at the the
The
poster
big
just outside
night.
the window, the big night, the big New Year's Eve party, and she and it's not even that she's going to that part of Elizabeth is going to experience it, it's the other one that's going to experience it, but she can't even take that away from herself.
Yeah.
And she doesn't like that's it's not that I'm taking an innocent life or whatever, or it's I can't murder someone, or I don't want to I can't end her story. It's that, ooh, we need this big night, and that's that fame part. Now
Yeah.
the other
Well,
thing too
look at
is
the
what are
final image. The very final image,
yeah.
she creepily her face,
Mhm,
which I think is another important, motif, I guess. Her face crawls onto her Hollywood star, looks
mhm,
up and some sprinkling, and that last moment in the spotlight. And
yeah,
she smiles. She's
yeah,
even as the horror, she's the spotlight.
yeah, yeah. What's the Sunset Strip or the Sunset Boulevard thing where it's not me that got too big, it's the pictures that got too small, or
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. Sorry, a bad paraphrasing. But the other thing too is, what are the prizes here? These aren't big, for the characters. These
Yeah.
aren't big roles in movies. One's allegedly a daytime exercise show, which is sort of a byproduct of being in the industry,
Yeah.
and not even a very well received one. And the other is some corny canned New Year's Eve show that a bunch of people are going to watch
And maybe a movie
on
role.
TV. Yeah, well, that's coming up, but the it's like, ooh, I'm going to be on Dick Clark's Rockin' New Year's Eve or whatever. Like that's we're not talking about the Oscars. We're not.
Tier
We're not.
2, tier 3 fame.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We're not
Um,
A-listers. These are not quite working actor things, but they're specials. And so even those prizes aren't that big a
the
deal.
stakes are relatively speaking
Stakes are
low.
pretty
Yeah.
small. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they're probably profitable. You can afford a home up in the hills, but I think
With
that's
that
where it
beautiful
ends.
view,
Yeah.
the big window, the big ass window.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
somebody in the chat, first, want to say, Cat Ion, um, puts in corporate animals.
Mm.
That's an interesting question. And we have somebody new, J Love. I really do love the shtick, Jim.
Yeah.
J Love in the chat says, I loved this movie, and it reminded me of The Fly, which made it even better.
Yeah.
You know? Well, if that was one of the things, if folks, if you watching in a replay or you're in the chat now, folks, definitely dig into his earlier work like Videodrome. I think that's an important, Scanners and Videodrome,
Yeah.
because I think you'll see even more of that here, and maybe Existenz.
I think
Crash, I'm not so much. I get why he did Crash, but I don't
Yeah.
think that's in this as much. So
I
you
think
gonna say, Jim?
Scanners is actually set in Montreal, filmed in Montreal, and maybe set in Montreal as
Yeah.
well, which is kind of fascinating. But
I think
funny you
it's the
mentioned-
reason I watched it as a kid.
yeah, well,
My
that-
first video, it's like, oh, it's made in Canada and it's sci-fi, and it's like, oh
Yeah.
my God, what is this?
my first introduction
I'm
to Michael
uncomfortable.
Michael Ironside, who's still kicking it. He was narrating something the other day. It said narration Michael Ironside. I think that guy's still going at it. And Louis Del Grande, of course, who went on to have that great CBC show about the psychic reporter called Being There. No, Seeing Things, Being There.
Yeah.
That's Peter Sellers. But speaking of sound effects, Rob, I was kind of surprised. I was really impressed by the soundscape of this too. I was surprised that it wasn't actually nominated because so much of the horror is conveyed by sound. And there's a great sort of I don't know if you'd call it a two-shot, but when the Monstro Elizabeth or no, I think it's when
Monstro Elizabeth Sue.
Yeah. It's not yet that, but it's when Demi Moore wakes up and that Latin lover's on the other side.
Oh.
She's stepping on the tile and you get those squishy meat noises. Yeah. And then he's coming down with those young feet of his.
She's desperate to close the door.
And carpeting, and there's no sound. It's just everything's light. Yeah. And then she's just like squish, 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 and he's just like stepping silently on this carpeted hallway. Yeah. I thought that was sort of and there's stuff like that throughout this whole movie, like neat little kind of contrasting shots and things like that. I thought were really fun and smart.
And that was one of the things. Like, there are times when you see a movie and the director is so obvious in. Beat up on David Eggers a little, maybe. No,
Robert Eggers?
Robert Eggers, thank you.
Yeah, that's okay.
I keep saying David Eggers. Okay, there are times when it's like, yes, I know you, the director, are here. For some reason, I do not feel the same way about this flick, even though it is so obviously a film.
Yeah.
And I think it's because it's so effective at so compelling, so effective at keeping your attention. You never really suspend disbelief. You never go, oh, that's nice flourish. Except at the end. That's where I'm kind of, okay, I see what you're doing here. I'm not sure I like it. But up to that point, it's like you're drawn in, and the second you kind of commit to it, you're in for the whole thing. And coming back to the big swing and connecting on that ball that is this film, like, wow. Like, just some great storytelling. And yeah, you're right, sound design. Coming back to the meaning.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's a great note, Jim. I mean, some of the things, was like, oh, you got Fountain of Youth, you got snake oil, which is a very American thing. Oh, this substance, this magic elixir, the idea that this is the goal, to just be young forever, which is something we see especially amongst the tech bro elite. That idea of, or even one of our pieces. Sorry, folks. One of our pieces of Peter Nygaard.
Oh, yes.
You know,
Yes.
that piece of um but yeah, I what is the moral of this story? You got these things going on. You can't say, notwithstanding her final smile, you can't say it's like, oh, that played out pretty well for her.
Mhm.
She died a good death. To quote a writer I'm a big fan of, at the end, there is no joyful defeat, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you know, it's one thing the neither Demi Moore. I don't know that we can speak to Sue's character because she's kind of a different product, but you know, Elizabeth, uh, she's not doesn't seem to be all that, you know, she's just recently been fired. So there's that. And she's reacting to it, you know,
Yep.
out of desperation. But there's
Well, and
not
just
really
even
there's not really a sense of acceptance
she's
in.
alone. She
Yeah.
has obvious, or the what we see, if it's even reliable, no friends. She never
Mhm.
interacts with her cleaning staff. And
Yeah.
then later on is forced to do the cleaning
Yeah.
because she's got this weird thing going on.
She got one table for one and a TV table, so you
Yeah,
know, she does live in isolation. There's sort of a lack of acceptance of anything in Elizabeth's life, so
yeah.
maybe
And
that's sort of the one of the, and as well, you
notwithstanding her
know,
big picture, everything's sort of weirdly, it's almost like you're in the inside of an eye.
yeah, that's true.
Think of the curved thing,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
all looks out. There's never, I mean, notwithstanding, and even the big poster looks out.
yeah.
You know, there's nothing, I mean,
Uh,
it's got a kind of
Introspection.
veloural feel,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's not uncomfortable, but it's certainly, it seems like completely designed to, yeah, no introspection, no kinda, "Who am I? What am I about?"
Yeah, yeah.
You know? It's and you think about the show she was on, all about the body.
Mhm, mhm.
Nothing nothing wrong, like, it is the thing in which we live and move and have being in. We are embodied creatures,
Yeah,
but yeah, to for just to say, "No, that's it. That is all I am is my body,"
mhm.
is tragic right from the get-go.
Yeah, yeah, and apparently she doesn't even get along with her, like her not roommate, but the guy neighbor. I guess that maybe it's an apartment or a duplex, a strange duplex in the hills. But he's ready to rail against her for making construction sounds until he sees Sue and is sort of disarmed by her. But yeah, so there's not even, she doesn't even seem to have that. And you know, one of the things, I don't know if it bugged you, I really wanted her to go out, at least go out with Fred, her old classmate. Uh, he was seemed like a nice guy. Fred, yeah, that was it. I was
Yeah.
just double checking. I mean, a little bit too much. Like, wow, wow, wow! I can't believe you're like, you know, okay, cool it, dude. You know,
Well,
but
and
it would have
even
been
he's
neat
like,
to
"Oh,
have.
you get this all the time." Like,
Yeah,
he's, "Oh, okay, he's aware. He can see
yeah,
himself. You know, he's got some theory of mind, let's say. I don't know.
yeah,
He I liked the way they played that they didn't go out, that it wasn't some weird uncomfortable thing.
yeah.
I liked the fact that she couldn't even get out, that she was so
Mhm.
busy. Again, back to the body, the look, the way she presents to the world, and it's like, you know, it's and that the real, like, sadness I felt for Elizabeth when she is, you
Mhm.
know, on her, on her phone, ignoring those texts, sabotaging herself. Another decision point. I'm gonna think about when that was in the film. It's not quite it's kind of a raising of the stakes moment right at the middle. we've got somebody. Well, first of all, we have another new person in the chat.
Oh my gosh. Hello.
I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. Jose, great question here. What is your theory as to why Sue taking the substance creates a monster? What's the metaphor in that? Is Demi Moore, is Elizabeth still somewhere in there? Didn't she die? Great question. Couple of these I think I can answer. The first and the third question. The third, this we got to come back to. Sue taking the substance, it's that she takes too much. It's forever about balance. You know, it's like all these things that offer too much. There's always a consequence. There's always a follow the rules or else. And of course, the rules are not followed. So that's why it creates Monstro Eliza Sue or whatever the hell is it called again.
I love the fact that that entity even gets its own title card.
Well,
like it's just like boom,
which is goes back to my what are we actually watching here?
Yeah,
you know, what is it we're watching? Is this like a meta thing? Okay. Third question is Demi Moore. Is Elizabeth still somewhere in there? Didn't she die? She is in there. I think that's the whole, like, when it stops, when the experience ends, everything's back to, this mush of monstrous
the face on the back,
self-loathing.
Yeah.
I think she is in there. Now, what's the metaphor in that? That's the $64,000 question, Jose. I think there's a ton of stuff going on in there. I think the biggest thing is that self-loathing. I would say if there's a metaphor, it's that self-loathing. It's this woman, and that's the great thing about tragedy, right? She becomes monstrous. Her self-hate, her idea. The real rot in the system is she's like, I am only my body. And I can only be watched. That is my only purpose here. No human connections, no. And that I'm telling you, that sucks.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, Jim, like, does that make sense? Like, I mean,
and in turn, she only watches stuff. At one point when Sue emerges again, she looks at the mess that Elizabeth has left, all the food all over the place.
Watching television.
The television's on, and she got the Shroud of Turin bum crease in the chair. And she just goes like, "Wow, all this person does is watch TV." And I think did they bring that up?
Yeah. Well, I don't think they called it the Shroud of Turin.
No, but I think she calls in and she says, all this person does is eat and watch TV and,
Well, back to how they're communicating with each other, right? How they're abusing each other, which is really just, it's a big metaphor for self-abuse, self-loathing, self-hatred, not taking care of yourself. Like that you should only take care of yourself as a purpose for others or something. DMG in the house.
Hey, DMG. I was going to mention, sorry.
I can't believe DMG. Can't believe you didn't mention that, Jim. No, DMG says, imagine if Aaron Grant, Demi's character from Striptease, had taken the substance. Okay. All right, moving forward. Let's
Sequel.
Let's you know what? Hey, you get two rim shots for that one, DMG. Yes, Shroud of Turin. I hope I get a good recording of that, because that should be God for a short. Thanks for that, Jose. Yeah, I think that's where we're going here, about that self-loathing. But I think there's other things going on here. There is a commentary on Hollywood as well. I've got, Jim, I had mentioned this before the show, a couple of LA stories, and it's interesting. It's rarely guys, although there is a guy in this. It's how she finds out about the substance and the spine and the backbone. Like that's what he's
Oh, yeah,
looking
yeah,
for,
yeah.
which is another kind of thing that, we could probably talk for 20 minutes on. But I do want to, let's go to here. I got a couple of stories I think that are, whoopsie, did not want to do that. Marissa Tomei. And I will put a link to this story in the chat, but this really stuck with me. Marissa Tomei, she was interviewed in 2020. She still regrets, Jim, taking on her first mom role, taking on mom roles, because she felt it limited her and her ability to get other roles. And she's still kind of talking about that. And I'm not that it's she's still talking about it like, how dare she accept your role?
Yeah.
But that it's something that she felt like was a big career mistake. She took on that first one in 2002. She was 36, or 2001. She was 36. But it's something that really kind of, pushed her career in a direction. And, because of the way LA works. And I've got a couple other stories I want to talk about. But one is probably it is also, of course, Jennifer Grey.
Oh.
You know what? Not maybe later at MSNBC, but Jennifer Grey and her, the plastic surgery she took.
Yeah.
That kind of like, this was the Ferris Bueller day, the Ferris Bueller's Day Off, the sister. Oh, come on, help me out, Jim. Patrick
Oh, boy.
Swayze.
You got to know so much about
Dirty
movies.
Dancing. I cannot
Yeah,
believe
yeah.
how the
Do you want the character's name?
well, wasn't it Baby?
Oh, it was Baby and Dirty Dancing for sure. Yeah.
And then anyway, here are two women, that one who, what she felt was like she was prematurely aged.
Jeannie Bueller.
Thank you. And another who, because of agents, etc., it's a little too ethnic. Maybe smooth the bump down a little. And then because of complications that were started to arise from that first surgery, she got it again. And then all of a sudden she's had to insist, no, really, I'm Jennifer Grey from,
Yeah.
And that is this price women are, and I'm not saying no guy's ever had to, do something with their teeth or anything too, but it really is focused on women.
Mm-hmm.
What they've had to do to be there, and all of a sudden, doesn't that become your be all and end all, and not because it's their fault, but because of, let's say, the machine's expectations.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Am I talking out of my folks, Jim? Everyone else? Am I talking out of my ASS? Am I talking out of my here? I want to know.
It's interesting. There's a couple, with Oscar season, there's a couple of roles that, of course, there's Demi, who is nominated for her Best Actress for the first time. And it's ironic. There's irony here in that she's playing essentially a failed actress. And with that role, she gets her best at 62 or whatever. She gets her first Academy Award nomination. And there's also Pamela Anderson, who's in The Last Showgirl, about an aging showgirl. So those are a couple of things that are happening, and it's kind of an irony that there's material there, and good material that they can actually tell the story with. Yeah, it's sign of the times, I guess. But it's kind of interesting that both those roles sort of came up at the same time. Pamela Anderson wasn't nominated eventually, but good for her. And she, as she said, the reward is the work, which is kind of a nice way to look at it.
When you know what, we might even be checking that out next weekend if it survives in Winnipeg's theaters that long. But again, I come back to for Demi Moore. Yeah, this isn't the first time she's gone there, which is one of the things where it's like, it's almost like Farja and her take on male gaze and objectification of the body, and Moore are really kind of like, so they're almost in the best way made for each other. And then Qualley willing to, also, because no, everyone's taken a big swing. No one is phoning it in. No one is, you can tell that they're all, not just all the nudity, but also the willingness to have that look on them and to look to behave the way they are, et cetera, is just like, oh, mwah. Speaking of one more story, because again, this thing, I do think celebrity aging and celebrity objectification is such an important part. I have one more thing. One of the creepiest things that this movie reminded me of, and it's at the beginning. Dennis Quaid is obviously, like, his character is just the nastiest piece of going. Like, and you'd think it's like, oh, he's a stereotype of the LA bag.
Yeah.
The thing is, he isn't. He is actually, and there's that moment where I'm like, oh, I think that's a reference to real life. That's no longer a movie reference, although it's also a movie thing going on. Another metaphor, maybe, Jose. Olivia Munn, big time movie star. Brett Ratner, another piece of he actually, and again, I will put this in the show notes, in the description, put a link to this, but I don't know if I can find it here, somewhere in here. This is great. So she's young, she's going to meet him, goes to his trailer, of course, because that's the way these creeps operate. And she's like, she was under the impression that he wouldn't be there. Oh, she was dropping something off or something. He walked out, like, in his trailer, with belly sticking out, no pants on, shrimp cocktail in one hand, and he was furiously masturbating in the other. And I'm like, that shellfish, that the way Dennis Quaid is, sorry folks, I'm not even here's the piece, and this is the let's highlight that moment, maybe even make it a little bigger for folks. But I really do believe, Jim, it's like, oh, that's a reference to that. Plus, and it does, there's a twofer here, Jim. I really believe is the way he's pulling everything apart, the way you work with shellfish, right? The shrimp and that.
Yeah.
It's break them on their backs.
Oh, okay.
Pull out the meat and consume it. And you're just leaving, just as he did, as he's buggering off to go kiss the ass of a buddy, and that usual male stroking each other. Big shot douchebags in big shot douchebag restaurants, and there is all these shells of
just left
beings that he's consumed from the inside out.
That's a good reading.
And so I think, and it is like, so I think, Farja gets a twofer there.
Maybe, well, and with a little bit of a nod to Apocalypse Now, because there's that lunch scene,
Right. Yeah.
right? Where it totally sort of
Yeah.
put me off shrimp, I think, for the next little bit. But
And
yeah,
how
where
the hell do
where
you eat roast beef in the jungle? Here,
there's
have some roast beef.
there's close-ups of them eating. I think it's the
Yeah.
scene that Harrison Ford's in,
Yeah. Yeah.
where a bunch of sort of admirals, or I don't know.
Well, there's
are-
the general, the obvious CIA guy,
Yeah,
and then he's
sitting around
bringing
having
in the
lunch.
file. Extreme prejudice.
Yeah, yeah. So
His
that's what I
ideas
was thinking
became
of.
unsound.
Yeah, but that's a great reading of that scene. Yeah, yeah.
I want to quickly go over to the chat before we get into final thoughts and
Sure.
one more kind of what do you think about this? But Jose first. Well, no, actually, let me move up here. So slice serve. We've
I saw
really
that
got
one.
two lookers here. Yeah, I love it. Is a great. It is,
Thank you.
and it's a tennis racket for the avatar for the.
Okay.
But I'm like, hey, is that a comment on the film characters or the two ding dogs on the screen now? Great to see you here, the slice serve. DMG, disagree a tiny bit on the mom role. Cameron Diaz was 36 when she played the mom of a teenager, My Sister's Keeper. Technically, the math worked, but she hadn't really done that before. I'm not saying that unique. I'm more saying that I was just more reporting the facts regarding
Yeah.
Marissa Tomei.
And we don't
how
see
she
all the
regrets
roles
it.
we don't see the roles that they get offered and turned down, because apparently that you often read about people saying, "Oh, I got typecast and I got this, and this." We don't know how many of those there are. There could be 100, there could be a dozen, or
Yeah. Well, which is, I think, Tomei's concern was that it's like I was just suddenly I do mom stuff. I'm now of, but
Mhm.
I mean, there's other things going on there. Read the whole interview. And I don't want to, I'm paraphrasing a lot of stuff for the purpose of the show. It's not like she's like, oh, I cannot believe it. She is not Tom Selleck still moaning about how he could have been Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
All right. Further, Jose says, I'm of the opinion that this movie is so interesting from a male perspective because the story concept could have only originated from the mind exorcism of a woman. Not 100% sure what you mean by that, but maybe actually that's an interesting idea of exorcism, right? Who would have thought it? Who would have thought it to make a body horror movie based around the premise of image and woman's insecurity? It's a good note, and I do think that is where Farja is kind of exploring, and of course the reason for that insecurity. It may be, let's say, Elizabeth's doom. She is the one who suffers, but you got to kind of go. It's not all on Elizabeth.
Mhm.
What does it say about our society? I think that's why you get the big Carrie scene at the
Yeah.
end where
Yeah.
everyone's covered in blood.
Kind of goes on, doesn't it? I mean, I was there for it.
I was laughing, not like, oh, this is so funny. Maybe that the dark comedy, Illuminate Pro, Illum Pro, I think. Anyway, in the chat, he was referring, or they were referring to.
Well, and also the blood covers the showgirls, and there's a couple of targets that that really get
everyone's and just spraying
Yeah.
like well, and
then down the hallway, and
bucket of blood. But you also
yeah.
get Grindhouse, and I was thinking of
It's almost like those Saturday Night Live skits where they have the obvious they cut their, like, the Julia Child Dan Aykroyd thing that's kind of famous.
well, I was thinking Kill Bill 1.
Oh yeah.
All right, Cat Iron said, okay, first, Eliminated Pro, that's it. He was referring to dark comedy. Is asking, you think Demi will get the win? We'll come back to that in a second. Cat Ion, I think the movie is very clear about beauty standards exploit people, mainly women, and how it drives those people to be dissatisfied with themselves and go to extremes to fit those standards. Absolutely. Certainly, perfectly legitimate read, and certainly I'm sure one of the things, I doubt Farja would go, oh, that's completely insane. DMG, maybe the exception proving the rule, but still boosted her career so she could film something, Sex Tape and Bad Teacher a few years later. Again, you're talking about yeah, I'm not quite sure what your argument is here, DMG. Like, it's how Tomei felt, not what Cameron Diaz did. And even Cameron Diaz hasn't been doing a lot of roles, in part because she did not like what she was being offered.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Okay, Cat Iron, the fact that his name is Harvey is an entertainment executive and is exploitative of women. Pretty girls have to smile. It's like every sexist thing.
Yeah. Cat Ion earlier said too that she was that they were happy that the date with Fred didn't happen.
Yeah.
I
missed that.
And I have to sort of agree. I think it's one of the turning points, one of the more human moments in the movie, and it's actually when you go to the movie website, the still is of Demi Moore wiping the makeup off that she's put on for this date with Fred, and I think that's sort of like
getting angry about it, and it's Demi Moore. I'm always kind of nervous. A stunning woman at all times.
Mm.
And unlike when I'm looking at Margaret Qualley and her objectification with the film, I am not feeling like a creep perving on a young girl.
Mm.
It's like, I just feel like a creep perving on an age-appropriate woman. But the point I was going to make is she's making herself ugly in her eyes.
Yeah.
In the mirror, right?
And that's, I mean, the one quick note about that is that she feels as an actress that she's probably got to present herself in a certain way. I think Fred would be delighted if she showed up with old jeans and a flannel shirt.
Is in her eyes. Her presentation.
If she showed up in a tracksuit, he would be over the moon about that anyway.
But it's never about what Fred.
No, it's all within.
It's all her. Again, her self-loathing, her unwillingness to, because you even see as she leaves to go get more substance, even though it's just her hand, put the glove on, she's bundled up. She wants to even, don't look at me, you know, which, it's like, she becomes even more frightened of the outside world, more wanting to be hidden from it. At least her body is. Coming to the will she win the Oscar? For those of you new, DMG's heard definitely my rant on this. I'll pass it over to Jim afterwards. But for me, I'm like, you know what? I'll wait a little while and then I'll go to one of the either 538.com or I'll see what Walt Hickey says. I'll moneyball that thing, but I don't know and I don't care. It's a remarkable performance in a remarkable film. I think who wins or not, it is important to the people who have been nominated because it has a huge impact on their marketability afterwards. Which is also a kind of thing. And we even see that as she's looking at the awards, which are all perfect women's bodies.
Yeah.
Stylized, no face, like no personality. It's just bodies.
And remember that I wrote this down the second time while watching it, where Harvey, the producer, is saying, "Oscar winner, my ass. What was that back in the '30s for King Kong?" Laughs.
Well,
So
and
they even
that's
mentioned it there.
yeah.
So
So
that's
she
funny.
was a a film star at one time.
Yeah.
That's a good note on all the levels. But there is a, I think when it for the Oscars, for me, it's you know what? For me, the real question is, will we remember Demi Moore and her body of work? And I think we're going to remember it for a long time, for quite some time after she stops acting. You know, just like there's just so much good there. Um, and this is just another example of, damn, um, Margaret Qualley, you know, I can only hope more of the same caliber,
Hmm.
because you only get better at it as you do it more, you know,
Hmm.
if you know, barring tragic circumstance or changing fashion. Will we remember this movie? That would be the question I would ask. And it is the question I'm asking of you and everyone else in the chat. And now, Jim, why don't you opine on her viability as a potential Oscar winner?
Yeah, I usually do pretty well with my family Oscar pool. We have a few people over, but I'm looking at the nominees right now.
The over under?
Yeah, I mean, I guess she's
What's
got a
the
fairly
Vegas
good.
line?
I mean, Mikey Madison did a fairly good job with the Nora, and a lot of times, and I don't mean this in a glib way, a lot of times when somebody's playing a hooker or there's nudity or a sex worker, sorry, they're off. Jane Fonda back in the day, they're often rewarded for that daringness, right?
Yep.
Yeah, Fernando Torres. I don't know if many people saw this movie, although I'm still here. I would love to see that, by the way. So
Yeah.
let's maybe post a note
Can
about
you
that. But yeah, I know a lot of people love Wicked. There's the Amelia Rise and perhaps backslide of Amelia Perez.
what
Yeah,
a
it's a tricky
great
one. Yeah.
what a great recommendation, Jim.
What's that?
I'm being facetious. It's like,
Okay.
I will list all the people who could win.
Yeah, no, let's well, it's short way of saying, yeah, who knows? I'll make my decision probably at 5 o'clock on Sunday, March 2nd,
Second, yes.
and see how it goes from there. But did I win last year? I think I might have won last year.
Yeah. Jose does have a follow-up on that I will get to, but I did, Jim. You know what? Before let's wrap up the prediction by asking the prediction sweepstakes by asking our floor manager. What do you think?
Uh-oh.
Luke, what's your take? Tell us. Is Demi gonna make it?
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Jim, once again, Luke, our floor manager, not even paying attention to the show.
Always with
Why?
the bait and switch.
Why do we keep him on?
I don't know.
Jose says the willingness to make herself grotesque and the physical acting, I think, is deserving of the Oscar. Plus, it's a lot of one woman show acting. The bathroom scene alone before the date. You know, there's some remarkable moments. And,
Yeah, that's a good
and
point.
same for Quali.
Yeah.
Jim, I think it's, you know what? It is time to get into final thoughts.
Sure.
Sorry, let's give it a proper
title card. There we go.
final thoughts. I did want to, and this is it's really obvious, but have you seen Farja's Revenge?
I had that sort of keyed up to go, and I just sometimes these things are so heavy. You're like, is this the last thing I want to watch before I fall asleep? And it seems like a heavy one. It's on my list. I think it's on Mubi too, which I
Yeah.
subscribe to
Yeah.
currently. But yeah, it's on the list. Haven't seen it yet.
It is a hard watch. Much like this was on a certain level, you know,
Yeah.
it's still, it is at its root, I think, a feminist commentary on society. It's not just about these individuals and about misogyny and patriarchy.
Mhm.
But it's also, it's like, there's a part of me, it's like, I was being a facetious bit of a smartass, and it's like, wow, Farja has no problem making a woman's ass look good. Like, and but it's like, it's so much so that it's like, it's like she uses, oh, Michael Bay's. Yeah,
Oh,
Bay. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
Bay. Yeah, Michael Bay, that male gaze that he uses in just about every one of his films, but probably most infamously on Fox in the first Transformers
Transformers. Yeah.
movie. Whereas here, it's almost like it's, yeah, I'm gonna do this, and you should feel uncomfortable. Doesn't feel like, I mean, it's almost kind of like how it was done in The Triangle of Sadness.
Oh, yeah.
You
Okay.
know, where the but here even more so, but there's a mix of, I'm thinking Sucker Punch and, well, can't believe I'm actually referring to a Zack Snyder film, but Sucker Punch and that kind of gauzy sort of look. Like, I mean, it's like, wow, I am really familiar with Margaret Qualley's
Yeah.
derriere now.
Mhm.
Like, I,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
know, not talking about, you know, a young, fit, attractive woman's ass. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of,
Yeah.
damn, you know, that's a lot. Um, that I think is actually, I mean, I've got a couple of other notes, but that was one of the things I'm like, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, you know, it's almost, it's so sexual and so, like, this movie is all about ass, you know, and it's so sexual. It but it's goofy to me. Like, it at no time, like, I watched this with my daughter and my wife the first time, and I didn't, you know, there was a couple of scenes where I was like, ugh. But my daughter's old enough that we don't need the, you know, the earmuffs or get the pillow, you know, cover your face, sex scene and Terminator kind of stuff. But you know, it's just sort of this weird, almost like an art installation depiction of the human body. And I didn't find it, I mean, it's just me, I didn't find it titillating at all. Ask, you know, if I was 15 years old, I might give you a different answer. But yeah, it was done with and then once things start to go wrong, when she's got the hip pops, the hip, you know, the drumstick is sort of writhing around in her body, then you're like, okay, I was right to sort of, you know, distrust this
Well, and
this whole thing.
that's
But
the thing. It's like, it's a lot, but it's also like, it's purposeful.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
not, and yeah, that's exactly it. Maybe it's by the time we're watching it, you already know it's there's no way you can kind of go, oh, this is hot. You're
yeah,
like,
no,
you're already on notice that everything, because of everything that's happened up before, it's almost like it's disturbing, isn't it? You know?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, what else? Any other notes before we let these wonderful chatters
Yeah,
you know,
no, that
Cat Ion says the contrasting shots between old Elizabeth's ass and Sue's boyfriend's ass were well done.
yes, yeah, that
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, I noticed that too. And when I watched it the
Wow,
second time. And it's back to back, like
Yeah.
it goes bang bang, right?
Yeah.
And obviously the difference is drawn between the younger and older bodies. But yeah, no, it just a really really solid movie. I'm definitely
Can
gonna
I
have to watch Revenge at some point.
I have one more. Yeah, it definitely worth the watch. Another thing with glass walls, like, I mean,
Mm,
she does have a glass walls and really kind of modern like
yeah.
production design aesthetic. I do have one more question. Speaking of production design, and I was like, for everyone here, there is a moment early first act. She's sitting there in her orange chair, and yeah, like the TV, the small little table in her kitchen, in her little galley kitchen, and you see a maid vacuuming back and forth, wall, two kind of two holes through the walls pierced, square like,
Yeah.
so you can see, but you don't see over her. And I'm like, that's a conscious choice. The might even not even a conscious choice. That's a set. That is a
Mm.
built
Oh,
set, because there's no way you're getting the camera and the distance and everything on what's a tiny little strip galley kitchen.
mhm.
Why do you what is going on with all of the production design, especially that? Did you have any ideas when it was coming up? And same for anyone in the chat.
Well, I think a lot of it is done for the effect of distance or isolation, right?
Mhm.
And there's walls between people. Open air spaces are designed like that for flow, for social flow, for energy flow, air flow, and there's none here, right? Like she's not even using it, and in this house, often there's a design show that's
Yeah.
on, and somebody gets something redecorated or something, and they always say, "Oh, we like to entertain. Oh, we need a dining table for 30 at the
12.
very
Yeah.
least." I'm like, get out of
Liars.
here with that.
Liars.
But
I
having said that,
say
there's no evidence.
Liars.
There's no evidence of Elizabeth doing that. Another aspect of her isolation, I
yeah.
guess. And the whole thing, it looks like it would have been modern at some point, but it's sort of a faded apartment,
Yeah.
right? Like she's not taking advantage of
Well,
the
just as
like the
her
window,
as she's a
the
fading
space.
star,
Yes,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
Um,
She might have bought this, when she was doing her best, and it seems a little, some of the carpeting and some of the when she goes into her closet, that room seems a little bit out of date, and yeah, it maybe the home has seen better days.
yeah. But it doesn't feel worn either. Like, it's clean,
Yeah,
it's everything's
yeah,
put away. I on the production design, one more thing, Jim, before we kind of wrap it up. There is again, back to hallways, and again, The Shining, the bleeding walls in the hallway that is probably the shining and the shining est of all of the halls is the poster hallway
yeah,
at the studio. And then there's bleeding walls. But how they actually seem to get longer the more often we're in these halls, and not in like a shock zoom effect,
mhm,
but just they really do seem to be longer. I don't know if they did it with lens choices, or they were actually screwing around, or mirrors, or they were screwing around with this physical set. It's like, oh, okay, now we're in super long hallway, but
yeah,
they get longer. And what I think is interesting is these hallways are for flow, and they're also they're liminal spaces. They're things that connect the spaces we live in. We're not supposed to be in them, but where do we see her in her own home? She isn't in front of the television, but she's sitting in her kitchen, which is really just another hallway.
yeah.
You know, like
Shaped
she's
like one, yeah.
forever in a liminal space, never in,
Mhm.
oh well. Folks, I will, yeah, I think we're wrapping up here, but before we go, if we could get a like, a subscribe, and maybe a little ringy-dingy of the bell. Guess no practical bell for Mr. Chaboyko this time.
Oh, sorry. I was looking at the, I was trying to catch up with the YouTube comments. DMG is saying something to the effect
Rick
of
Moranis never needed
yes.
to do nude scenes.
And I found that distracting. I haven't seen the director's cut of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, so maybe there's something in there. But
absolutely,
you never know.
Folks, thank you all very much. This was a great show. In part
Nice
because
meeting
we
you
have
all.
the mightiest little chat on the internet, and you all had great questions. You all brought an A game, and that just makes our understanding of this film better. And hope we see you on our next show, which will be next week sometime. All right.
You bet.
Good night, everybody.